I think often we make the mistake of thinking that missionaries and or pastors, like these are like all stars, and they're cut from some kind of different cloth, right? Than I am an average person, right? I'm just a fill in your brain, whatever your career is. They have a calling. You have a job. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1, one of my favorite passages of scripture, right? Where Paul's saying, I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling because you have been called by God. You have a calling on your life.
Created on purpose and for purpose.
Hey, welcome back to the Darren Earlewine podcast. So stoked that you downloaded this episode. And I just want to say a heartfelt thank you. I know I say it all the time, but I really am grateful for those of you that are part of the podcast community, whether you subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or something else, wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. We put this material out, this content out every single week, not because we need something to do, but because we wanted to encourage and inspire your life to discover God's purposes for your life and live that out. And you don't do that alone. You do it in community, and we're stoked that you're part of this community. And we'd love to hear from you. I love getting emails from listeners, from folks that are reading the book, for people that are listening to the podcast. You can always email me, Daron, D-A-R-O-N, at blackbirdmission.com. You can text me 317-550-5070, or you can reach out through any of the socials. I'd love to know what's going on in your journey. And maybe if you have some ideas, hey, I'd love to hear a podcast episode on this. Or, hey, have you ever thought about talking to this person? We'd love for you to be a part of helping us kind of curate what we're doing here on the podcast. And right now, we are in the third part of a three-part series on relationships. We've been doing all of 2024. We talked about relationships up with God. We talked about relationships in with others. And we're spending 3 weeks talking about relationships out to the world. And welcoming back for the second week, my good friend Eric Maitland. Eric, welcome back
Thanks,
to the podcast.
Brother. Great to be back.
And Eric, we're going to take a little deep dive into your journey of representing Jesus out to the world, okay? And you teased it a little bit in the last episode. So if you didn't listen to the first episode with Eric, you can pause this one, go back, get a little appetizer, and then come back and be ready for this. But Eric, you have been serving as a missionary and musicianary for 20, how many years now? 25?
Yeah, I guess close to 20 years. It'd be 19 years, so close enough.
So the majority of your adult life has been given to this.
Yep.
And here's what I want to set as the backdrop before you, because what I want you to do today is just kind of walk us through that journey, your story. Because what I want to set as the backdrop for this is, I think often we make the mistake of thinking that missionaries and or pastors, like these are like all stars, and they're cut from some kind of different cloth, right? Than I am an average person, right? I'm just a fill in your brain, whatever your career is, right? Not like Eric. Like I couldn't lead a Bible study. I couldn't disciple people. I couldn't be involved in mission stuff. I couldn't lead my own missions thing. Like that's not something for people like me, right? Yeah. That I think is most of the time the narrative that the devil wants people to believe. Those people are special, right? They have a calling. You have a job. You have a career. And we harp on this all the time in this podcast. I mean, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1, one of my favorite passages of scripture, right? Where Paul's saying, I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling because you have been called by God. You have a calling on your life. In the process, in the adventure, and I love that, the adventure is stepping into each moment as God is leading us and having the courage and the humility to just say yes. Like, I'll step into that next adventure. I'll step into that next adventure. And what I find in my life is the more I say yes, is that every yes that I say to the adventure of walking with Jesus drives me into greater relationship up with him. It creates greater relationships in with others. And it's always taking me out into the world to be his witness. And you're not cut from a different cloth. You're not a perfect human being. You are a flawed human being that grew up in Jay County, Indiana,
Oh, yeah.
And probably if we went and interviewed 16-year-old Eric Maitland,
Mm-hmm.
and then we pushed play on a highlight reel of what you've done for the past 20 years,
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that 16-year-old Eric would think that's impossible and at least unbelievable.
Yeah.
Fair?
Totally fair.
And so Eric's going to take us on a little of his adventure. I just want to encourage you is as you're listening, don't allow the voice of the enemy of your soul to whisper this whole time, yeah, cool for him, but not for somebody like you. It's for somebody exactly like you if you just keep saying yes to the invitation into the adventure. So Eric, let's dive into the story, man, because I've loved getting to be a part of your orbit, as we talked about last episode, for the past, 15, 16, something years.
It's been a minute.
We keep waking up and going to sleep and waking up, and it's the years are flying by. But give us a little bit of your journey. I know you gave us some of it last time, but let's start there. Let's go back to Jay County. Let's talk about kind of the beginnings of this adventure.
Yeah, and I love my small town where I grew up. Still have some great friends that I went to school with there that I'm still really close with these days.
For our massive audience in Australia that we talked about in the last episode, where is Jay County?
Yeah, exactly. Most people in Indiana don't know where it is. So, Portland, Indiana is the town within Jay County that I'm from, and it's the county seat, folks. So it is the biggest one in Jay County. But we call it Jay County because the whole county went to the same high school. So it's like, I didn't find out till I got down to, Indy that wasn't the norm, I feel like. But yeah, I grew up in a small town, loved my small town, went to church there, was raised in a Asbury United Methodist church in my small town, and you are exactly right. If you had talked to any version of me before 20 years old probably and said any of this, I would have said that is absolutely crazy. There's no way that's what I would end up doing with my life. And really, I didn't have any clue what I wanted to do.
That was going to be my question. Yeah, no idea.
Dude, this podcast that you make and the time that you spend to exhaust the conversation of helping people figure out who God formed them to be, that it's not an accident, that there's actually, spiritual DNA inside of you at work, like that would have been so helpful, But have amazing parents. They've been so supportive, too, of this crazy journey. But
your parents are awesome people.
Oh, my gosh. Just talked to Mom again last night, and they're supposed to be retired, and they're just traveling the world and doing all the things. Mom started a business in her retirement, is just killing it, and actually she's going to do some leadership consulting for us and our team even next week. But yeah, love my small town. And Nathan Klatt, the lead singer, violin player from Milo Rickshaw, my best friend I grew up with down the street, same small town. And I love growing up there. I did not really... I didn't have a lot of spiritual breakthrough growing up. I got familiar with my faith, obviously, through youth group growing up, but I was part of a traditional church, and I'd say stylistically, it wasn't super relevant for me. I didn't really understand the story of Jesus, the message of Jesus, anything you're talking about here. That would have been, it just wasn't high on my radar. I did have a moment at like one of those Youth for Christ retreats or something where I made the decision, I prayed the prayer when it was offered there, And so I'd say as a believer, and I went to college at this great Christian university called Indiana University.
Why'd you go to IU?
Oh, I wanted to go to IU. My dad went to IU, wanted to get a little farther from home. And I don't really know. I was just kind of going with some friends, and I also was just trying to figure out life. I didn't know who I was going to be or what I was even wanting to study.
Were you an amazing student? What was your GPA?
Amazing student.
Getting out of high school?
No, not a great student.
No.
At all. Yep. I'm not a great athlete, not a great student, so I had that going for me, which is great. But at IU, they had this exploratory major program when I was there to probably just get your money because they know you're going to go at least an extra victory lap. Yeah. You're going to go fifth year at least. And so that's how purposeless I was, if you think about it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with my life or who I was or who I was born to be. Had, again, supportive family and was having a blast with life, but didn't really know what my purpose was. I didn't really answer that question until I had an encounter with Jesus, and I shared some of that story in the last episode. Like the kind of encounter with Jesus you don't get over, the kind that you kind of have to tell somebody about, the kind that changes the way you live tomorrow and the way you live next week. And it really sent me on a trajectory where I just realized I didn't even have to know exactly what I was going to do with the rest of my life, as long as I knew I was saying yes to him and doing my best to follow what he was guiding me toward. And
see, but I don't want us to miss that, Eric, is you're not summa cum laude, salutatorian of your class. You're not the state champion. You're not getting scholarship offers everywhere. Like,
nope.
Here's the funny thing. Last week, you were standing on a stage in front of hundreds of college students leading worship for Greek University. And I guarantee you, there were tons of those students that were like, man, what it would be like to be that guy. Like, you were that guy. You were the guy on the stage leading worship. Like, man, he's a big deal. And like, the week before that, you were just doing a thing with Athletes in Action.
Yeah.
Like, you traveled around the world. Like, all these different things where, for thousands of people that have been a part of Mercy Road for the past decade, like, you are the worship guy they see every week. And it's like a lot of upfront on a platform type of time that people could think, yeah, man, that guy's got to be, like I said, he's got a different kind of DNA than me. You know what I mean?
Man.
He's special. God loves him more than he loves me. Like, God only uses crazy talented, super smart, athletic, whatever it is, people. And it's like, no, all of that's true. But as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, you had no idea what you wanted to do. You weren't the first round draft pick for every single, scholarship and this, that, and the other. And you were like, oh, let's go to IU because Dad went there, I guess, and we'll figure it out. And then it's like, and then I met Jesus, and he started rewriting the adventure of my life.
Yep. And that's really interesting when you put it that way, because I don't know if it's the gift of being 5'6" or insecure, but I just never think of myself as the guy. That's crazy if people do. But you're right. When we put someone on a platform, and what do they say? It takes, in Nashville, they say it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So yeah, sure, people probably see things that have taken repetition and decades to become comfortable. And I don't know about you, Darren, but I was so terrified the first time I ever led a Bible study, because I was in my fraternity. That's the first time I ever led a Bible study with like a group of like 80 dudes living in a mansion, and our goal is to party hard and to just have a blast, and to have had that encounter with Jesus that was so real that like I got to tell them what happened. I got to make sure they know what's going on, and to see God use that scared, insecure, but zealous dude.
Yeah.
Because it was like, for the first time, when I experienced the love of Jesus in a real way during a retreat through Greek University. That's why I love that ministry so much. And my discipler, Andy Dalton, is still my mentor to this day.
Yeah.
Serves on our board for Two-Eight Ministries and is just a huge, voice and source of wisdom for my life. And I don't do leadership in a vacuum or alone. I always try to surround myself with people that I respect, who, have the wisdom and the gift of challenge to help me keep growing. But yeah, Andy was discipling me back at IU and was telling me I had to be the one to lead this Bible study. I'm like, there's no way, dude. I've never even read the whole Bible. Like, I can't do this. He's like, well, I'm not a fraternity brother with that frat. You got to be the one to do it. And I'm so glad he did.
Yeah.
And didn't let me back out of that, because God will meet you in that space. My first tour with the missionary agency, Global Training Ministries, that we served with for over a decade, our first trip with them was to Russia, and we did this church planting tour with Mission Possible. It's like the name of our gala. But anyway, we were going to all these different villages in Russia, and most of these villages, they'd never even seen an American before, so they didn't even think we were real Americans. They thought we were just Russians speaking English or something, and then they realized we couldn't understand them. But we went to all these little villages and using Western music to draw a crowd. And sometimes in a village of 400 people, 200 would show up, and almost half of them would get saved. And we'd be like, well, church starts here in this communist culture hall we rented. Church starts tomorrow. Here's your church planner. And they just had these pastors who had been through 3 months of training, and they were going to lead these churches. And that was my first missionary tour. If you could imagine how terrified I was. I had never done this before. I love music. I played music, tried to use music to just pick up girls in college, But then found Jesus, and music became, for me, a tool that I got to use to help gather people and help tell them the story of Jesus. And so it was terrifying to do that cross-culturally for the first time, using translators and interpreters, all this. And so at the end of the tour, we're there for a month, Vadim, our translator, he gives me this little green frog. I still have it in my studio to keep me humble. He gives me this green frog playing a guitar, and he just said, he gave everybody else nice gifts, and he gives me this green frog. And he's like, Eric, I want you to have this to just remind you, you are so green. And that was it. That was my encouragement at the end of my first tour. It's just like, and I think that imposter syndrome, man, I don't know about you, but like I still struggle with that, you know, when you're in a place where like I've never done this before. Oh, God, give me like peace or give me whatever. And it's like, no, we just need courage. We need courage and faith in those spots.
Well, dude, what I love, a couple things I want to grab from that. One is this whole series about relationships has been about up in and out. And just in the way you told that story, check it out. You had this interaction, undeniable life-changing experience up with Jesus. Mm-hmm. But you're at a Greek University thing being poured into in an in relationship with Andy Dalton.
Yep.
Which immediately from the up, it goes to this in. And what happens in this in relationships, he begins challenging you. How are you going to live this out to the world?
Yeah.
You're going to start this Bible study.
Yep.
And to see how the three legs of that stool are working in tandem for your discipleship and for your growth. The other thing I think is interesting, and I steal this from Mike Breen, and I say it to my huddle all the time, trying to encourage these guys to actually go start their own discipleship huddles, is anything worth doing for God, is worth doing poorly the first time. Yeah. And it's like, it's got to be perfect. 100%. It's got to be great. It's like, no, listen, you need the courage to just go do it poorly the first time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you were the green frog, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that Bible study you led wasn't real great.
Was probably terrible. Yep.
Right. But what did God do with your humility and your courage? He started bringing people to himself.
I mean, when I look back now, dude, it was nothing short of a miracle that Bible study and Acacia Fraternity, when I was like 21 or 22, had any fruit, and we saw God do what none of us could have done. So it's awesome. That's where he takes over. As we step into that place of faith. I remember, LaVon, mutual mentor right there too, she said one time, she goes, Jesus doesn't respond to need. He responds to faith. He responds to faith. There was need all around him, all the time. But when you see him doing his greatest work, it's when he sees a person of faith.
Wow.
So I love how Jesus takes over when we get into that sweet spot.
So good, dude. So you come to faith, you go to IU, you get done, and right off the bat, then you get connected to doing global music stuff. Mm-hmm. Take us through that adventure.
Dude, all I can say is like my one superpower is that I just keep saying yes to Jesus best I can. I can discern his voice. Yeah. That's all I got, dude. That is the only bragging I can ever do is what he can do.
I love it because check it out. And we say this all the time, and I have had this conversation probably 10 times in the past month with people. Ephesians chapter 2, right? It says that we're the workmanship of God, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he's prepared in advance for us to do. Yeah. I hope if you listen to the podcast all the time, you're starting to think like, does Darren actually know a lot of the Bible, or has he just got like 3 or 4 go-tos, right? Because I come back to the same ones because it's so applicable in this. You are the workmanship of God, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he already had prepared in advance for you to do. So it's a setup.
Yeah.
All you got to do is go, yes. Well, 2 things. You got to learn to hear his voice. And then when you hear it, you just default to yes.
Yeah.
Even if it's freaking terrifying and you feel completely unprepared to do it and you think you're going to do a terrible job on it. Like, and this isn't the Eric Maitland is special story. Nope. This is not the Darren Earlewine is some awesome, amazing person podcast. This is when you follow Jesus and you get connected to him and you're his son or his daughter, okay, you become his workmanship, the craftsmanship of God created in him to do good works, which he's prepared in advance for you to do. And the process then is, what are you telling me? What are you asking me? What adventure are you inviting me into? And just default to this. And I've said the same thing to people. Here's the deal. The deal I have with God is, God, the answer is always yes. Right? I'm defaulting. Yes, I will do that. That's why I never tell God that I'm never going to do something. Because I think when you tell God, I'm never doing that, I think God writes it down. He's like, this is going to be funny, right? That's why I've never told God I'll never move to Michigan. I just tell him, Lord, you know I love you.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you could please have mercy upon my soul. Don't.
If you could pass this cup.
Don't take me any further north, Lord. And so far, we've been successful to just Indianapolis is as far. Thank you. But side note, but I just want people to listen through those lenses, Eric, because you're telling us, like, if you want to start seeing your life become a life that you want to really live and that it's an inspiration and a joy and an adventure, this is the rule of the rest of your life. Learn to hear the voice of God and let him know the answer is always yes.
That's good, man.
You know?
Man, that's hard. Yeah, and the more you get to know this God, whoo, he works in paradoxes too, man. Because like the idea of the only way you're going to get anything is to give up what's in your hands. The only way you're going to, be established and for him to elevate and establish you is for you to just surrender. It's like, I think the thing we like somehow skip around though when we share the story of Christ and maybe our own testimonies is I don't think it's real fun to hear the first 5 years of my faith journey because it was a lot of come and die with me. It's a lot of surrender. It's a lot of, you need to learn how to sit and stick and to submit to bad authority sometimes. You need to learn. You need to humble yourself until another man's field before you'll have your own. You need, I love that someone told me when I first got married that really it was going to be one of the biggest invasions to my privacy ever. That it was going to be, that really marriage is a call to death because if two are going to become one, really, like if Eric and Jillian Maitland are going to become this new thing in covenant relationship, we both have to die to who we were before each other. And that's what it is to marry Jesus. That's what it is to be in covenant with God. And so I don't think the yes thing is super fun at first, but man, are we built for it.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you will never experience freedom like you do in surrender and discovering that like a sheep is really only going to be at home with a shepherd. As soon as the shepherd walks out of the mansion, the sheep's going with it. It's not going to be like, well, I really like this house. It is that kind of peace.
Well, that's why I remember one of my mentors teach me that, that repentance is the greatest, is the best thing that can happen to you every day of your life because repentance is just agreeing with God. Mm-hmm. And so, there are those moments of discipleship and of change and of learning to die to self. But the beauty of it is it's coming to the place of just going, oh, yeah, you're right. Your way's better than my way. Like I was trying my way, but you're right. That doesn't work. Like I agree with you. You're actually God and you're what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yes, because there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of agenda, there's a lot of lot of things wrapped up in that process. It's not an overnight poof magic trick thing, but it's still the same thing of the answer is yes, you're actually right. And that could be go to India. That could be dump your boyfriend.
Yeah.
Right? That could be go serve with this ministry. That could be change your major. That could be a lot of different things. Give up your time. You know what I mean? Give up your money. But so, yes.
If I were to, this is one of the most helpful stories because we understand everything in story, right? This was told to me like when I was a really young Christian, and I think it's extremely helpful. So I don't know how often you just tell little kids stories on this podcast, but this is what was told to me, and I still need it to this day. This dad takes his daughter to like a grocery store, right? And you remember how like in the 80s, they had those little vending machines with like little fake jewelry and stuff in them, you put a quarter in. And so, the daughter's like, hey, Dad, can I have a quarter? And so she goes to the vending machine, she gets these fake pearls and she puts them on and they go shopping. And that night, her dad asks his daughter, as he's tucking her in, and he's like, hey, I love you, right? And she's like, yeah. He's like, do you think I could have your pearls? And she's like, well, Dad, I like these pearls. I just got them. Here's my bear instead or whatever. And then the next night, tucking her in and telling her he loves her. And he's like, hey, honey, your daddy loves you, right? She's like, yeah, I know, Dad. I love you too. And he's like, can I have your pearls? And she's like, I really like my pearls, Dad. Here's my Barbie instead. And this goes on for about a week, And finally one night, she knows it's coming. Her dad's tucking her in and he's like, hey, I love you, right? And now she's getting emotional because she realizes that she's making a statement to him, whether she means to or not. And she's like, yeah, I know you love me and I love you too. And he's like, can I have your pearls? And she finally takes them off and she gives them to her dad and he gives her real pearls. He gives her real pearls. I don't think we have any clue what's on the other side until we just give him our pearls, And you think of the rich young ruler, we can't get that mad at that guy. That guy might still be in heaven. He did at least a lot of the Ten Commandments pretty right.
Yeah.
What stinks about that story is I don't know if he realizes what he would have got in return if he gave up those pearls. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I promise you, if you're watching this, like I don't have to make any sales pitch of my own accord or anything I need to deliver on. I promise you, if you give God whatever pearls you're holding on to and you trust him with a different life, I absolutely guarantee you it is what you're made for, and it's what you long for, and you just don't even know it. You don't even know what you long for until you give up the stuff you think you need. You know, that kind of thing. What a simple story, but those things need to be taught to us, because to follow Jesus is to be invited to die a lot. A lot, you know. I'm going through it again right now, you know, giving up a level of security and part of my income from being on staff at the church, you know, that I started with Josh and Lisa out of their house, Mercy Road Church. It's been my last Sundays, this Sunday. And to trust God with the other part of my finances as I step back into full-time missionary work outside the walls of the church again. We're just the need around our overdose epidemic and around the work that we're doing and documenting faith movements around the world and trying to help the next generation, you know, find their comeback story and their call to ministry as well. You know, I got to put more hours into that. Yep. And so that's another call to die and trust again. So here we go, you know.
I love it, Eric. It's such an awesome progression, man. And you've continued on this path. You know, you did global stuff. You lived out of you lived in India, then you lived out in an RV for the first couple of years of your marriage. Yeah. We should have Jillian in to talk about how terrible that situation was. And, you know, you came back, we talked about real briefly on the last episode, you know, we got connected through a young adult ministry, and as I was kicking off Pub Theology, and you and Eric, and Nathan then start My Yellow Rickshaw. You guys have been doing, you know, outreach and entertainment in bars for forever now, still doing some of that.
Yeah.
And then I want you to take us through, because I mean, we could talk for hours about the stories we have from all of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which are amazing, and the mentors that we had that kind of brought us both up through that, and the highs and the lows of all that, right? The two things I want to hit on before we're running out of time is I want to talk about how God nudged you into and invited you into this adventure with the opioid, you know, crisis in Indiana. And then I want to talk about what you're doing right now and the story you're trying to capture in India.
Sure.
Because some of that's coming full circle from where it started for you. So
yeah,
you're doing Mercy Road stuff. You're doing My Yellow Rickshaw stuff. You're working with sometimes you're working with some injured troops, Walter Reed, with one of our mentors. Then how does this start to where you say, you know what, I'm going to start giving a big chunk of my life to capturing the story, raising awareness, and trying to help the combat stories of people that have been involved in this opiate epidemic?
A quick commercial break here on the podcast. I want to tell you a story about a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago with a faithful podcast listener like yourself. We started talking about spiritual DNA, the online course that I've created that helps you discover who you were born to be. And I said, hey, have you gone through spiritual DNA yet? And I'm assuming they listen to the podcast, like, hasn't everyone gone through spiritual DNA? They said, you know what? No, I haven't. And I said, well, why not? They said, I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I really want to discover who God's created me to be. So if that's you, today's your day. Here's what you need to do. I need you to go to DarrenEarlewine.com/spiritual DNA. That's where you can get the course, and I want to give you a discount because you're part of the podcast family. So once you go to buy the course, go to the promo code and use promo code podcast. You're going to get 20% off the course today, all right? That's your next step. Do it. DarrenEarlewine.com/spiritual DNA. Use promo code podcast and start your journey today to discover who you were born to be. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, so, you know, when I was 25 years old and Jillian was 23, we just got married, moved into an RV. We started this thing called Two-Eight, which stands for Psalms 2:8, ask me for the nations, you know, and literally ever since I graduated college, I've done missions work. And Mercy Road, the church that, you know, we helped plant with Josh and Lisa out of their house, that's the first U.S. church that I've ever really worked with. And it's been an amazing ride. There, you know, it's such a call to missions and empowering, you know, Christians to go do the work of Jesus, not just have the pastors do it, but let's do what Jesus showed us. And this is the priesthood of all believers, you know. And let's make sure we help train up others to go step into the world and do that. So love Mercy Road, but that's really always been a part of our life. All along, there's been this other thing in our life where we were going overseas 3 times every year, you know, and doing doing ministry in partnership with church planting groups and with recovery ministries in Jamaica and with YWAM in China around the Olympics, and anywhere we could use music as a tool of helping unite communities together, and create moments where we could share the message of Jesus, and help grow churches and help advance recovery efforts in other countries, we would do that. But when 2017 and 2018 hit, and I started realizing that we were losing what would be equivalent to a 737 going down every single day in America to overdoses, I had no idea. When this became clear to me, and I understood the gravity of it, I was like, that can't be real, right? If there was really a 737 going down every single day in America, we would know about that, right? Yeah. But then you start realizing, but when the people on that 737 are stigmatized as drug addicts and criminal, it's not always such a big deal. Now we can justify this. Now we can say, well, that was their fault, or and I was like, how is this happening? Started researching the opioid epidemic because I had friends that I had lost to this, and I didn't quite understand, this how we got to where we were and how complex this issue was. And so the more research we did, the scarier this thing got, and the more we realized there was a real problem with just communication and awareness around this, and the need to reduce stigma so families, especially in small towns like where I'm from, could get the help they needed without feeling like, man, if I tell somebody what's going on in my life, right, I won't be allowed at church, I won't be allowed at work, I won't, and so there's a lot at stake. And so we created a film experience for the first time that helped tell the story of what was going on, at least here in the state of Indiana, around this through the lens of people who were living it. A mother of a deceased addict and someone who was a heroin user who is now in healthcare, and a friend of ours who played football for Taylor and became addicted to prescription pills after, a surgery. And so it was just a really complex story. So we were going around the state, running this film experience over and over. And what we hoped would happen was that people would come up to our merch table at the end and be like, hey, thanks for sharing this and really understanding where I'm at. I think I'm ready to get help. I think I could use some help. And then get connected with one of these amazing resource tables that were there. And instead what would happen for us was there would be a line of people, usually parents, who would tell us who's passed away from overdose. And we started realizing after about 3 cities in that we were behind on this. In fact, even just last year in Indiana alone, we lost almost 3,000 lives just in Indiana to fatal overdoses. Now that's fatal. We had way more overdoses that, people were able to be resuscitated because of Narcan and other things. But as far as fatal overdoses, that's almost 3,000 funerals that we should have had. This is a very complex and scary issue that we're dealing with right now. And so here we are, a global missionary agency that since 2018 stopped traveling internationally to just focus on Judea, Jerusalem, in our own backyard to help the families who needed help here. And we realized that we had this crazy set of skills from using music and events to help rally communities together, maybe to help, accelerate faith movements or, recovery efforts in places like Jamaica and other places. We could use this same skill set to help our recovery efforts here in Indiana do the same thing. We really just needed to get people together. And events are a great way to help reinforce sobriety. And they're called sober social events. We get to do festivals around the state now. We just started a new tour in 2022, and last year was the second year, and we're going to do the next 2 years again in partnership with Division of Mental Health and Addiction, and also with Mental Health of America, to help talk about mental health and substance abuse on a large scale, and to bring these festivals around the state, some areas where we really need hope and healing, and to just encourage the people who got their comeback story to just stay in it, stay in recovery, help the next person find it. So it's incredibly rewarding work, but it's so different. And you ask how we got there, and dude, again, it all comes back to just saying yes to Jesus. And I think sometimes when you run a ministry like we do, it's like, well, this isn't on brand for me or something. But what's on brand for us is trying to help bring the hope and healing of Christ to where it's desperately needed and hardest to find. And here we are in our own backyard needing it as bad as we've ever seen in any other part of the world. So, yeah, we just ended up there.
Love that. Because, a couple of things that I was hearing is, we've said on the podcast before, the idea that nothing is wasted, right? It's woven. Like he's weaving together parts of your call, and you see those threads that have been present, right? Music and outreach, like all of these things, like you've been doing them for over a decade. And it's like, yeah, this thread. And then, I remember challenging some students once at a summer camp. Like you put a bunch like different houses up, and everybody was cheering for like what house they wanted to live in, And of course, as the houses got bigger, right?
Yeah.
Like the kids got, like more excited, and just talked about like the idea of, are we pursuing our dreams? Like, what would make my life great? Or are we at a place where we're saying, you know what, God, take the threads of my life that you've been weaving together and like begin to weave them together with your dreams.
Yeah.
Like, God, what's breaking your heart right now? Like, what's on your heart and mind?
Yes, that's a better question.
And then
Yep.
I challenge the students of like, what if you started dreaming about trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems? Right? Like you have access to the abundance of God's resources. You have the abundance of God's ideas. You have the abundance of God's power and spirit, and the fact that he longs to heal and redeem, right? This is what he's doing. But to go like, okay, here's all if I look back at my life, here's all of the threads you've been weaving together.
Yeah.
But like, how might we start solving some of the world's biggest problems? And I think even for you, it sounds like you weren't even like seeking to solve it. You were just open to say yes to it.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, listen, we're going to take these threads that you've been, remember these? Oh yeah, that's just what I do. Yeah. Okay. And I love that. The idea of, because I struggle with the idea of like, it's not on brand. It's like, hey, we do stuff, we help kids discover their purpose in schools and in companies now. And we're doing some coaching with people, you know what I mean, in companies. And, and then for 3.5 years, we were a radio show. And then sometimes we still do the bar thing, right? And it's like, would you freaking figure out what you want to do when you grow up? And I do feel sometimes guilty for that. Like, just decide. But I love that idea that like, no, here's what my brand is. Mm-hmm. Like, I take the threads of my life and just say yes to whatever God wants me to do.
Dude, that's good.
That's what you just said, and I love it. If people are inspired by that, Eric, and like, dude, I'd love to help solve that problem. How could they maybe help what Two-Eight's doing?
Oh man, we could use all the help we can get, but we're definitely a smaller organization that's still at a place where our opportunity to do things and to impact change is greater than our resources, because if you don't have a ton of time and staff, it's hard to find time to go out and fundraise, to get the resource to do that. So we're always asking for people who'd consider helping, sponsor an event in their community or in their part of the state. We also are getting ready to have a big spring gala, so you could come to that and have a great time. We're going to have Ryan and Lauren Allward emceeing this thing, and Mila Rickshaw, the band helped start way back in the day, you know, starting Pub Theology together. We'll be performing that night. John Mobley, a great magician and just awesome, man of God who's on this journey as well. Rashad Cunningham, everybody's going to be there. It's going to be an awesome night. We're going to celebrate some of the stories of impact that we've seen and the life change that we get to see all the time that a lot of people don't. And then to basically propose this challenge that you just said right there, like, could we maybe do this together to where we can help more people? And so, that'll be on April 27th, and it'll be downtown. It's going to be awesome. I can, make sure there's a link for some of the info on that. And then the other thing is we just need volunteers. We need people who'd be willing to say, hey, maybe I don't have like an excess in funds to help out, but I've got time, and I'd be willing to learn how to set up an LED wall or, put up a PA or help just be someone who could just help serve food to these communities. We go around the state. We literally do 2 different tours a year around the state of Indiana, and it's a great way to see the state if you live here. But we need help. We just need volunteers and people who are just able-bodied to say, hey, we'll help, cut costs on events by just volunteering our time and learning how to do kind of a technical production skill set. Yeah. And we train usually the month before our tours. So, there's lots of different ways. And that's just with our organization. I'd say there's a lot of great organizations in this community that maybe it's closer to your heart and your natural gifting and passion, and just ask somebody else if they could use help in their field. Because trust me, if you're like us and you're trying to, impact more change and build the thing that God's called you to build, you need help. We're not meant to do it alone. And I'm grateful that I got to do that for, a decade before we really started building a lot of our own stuff. I got to help build someone else's field with them and stuff.
Sir, let's end this episode by the newest deal, because your next adventure you said yes to is become a filmmaker.
Now that's off brand.
So tell me about what you're doing
great.
with
That's
this
great.
next adventure with this whole India project.
Man, I hope that this podcast is really a lesson in learning to just listen to the voice of Jesus, because I'm talking openly about that part of my life that I think for whatever reason here, especially in the West, what are you, like a psychic or something? What do you mean you listen to God? And I don't want to be the guy that sits there on the street corner saying everybody's going to hell and has a megaphone. Like, I mean, I just luckily have been taught ever since I found Jesus and stepped into a relationship with him. I've been taught by others how to just actively listen to the Lord, to not let my faith be something that happens on a Sunday, go through the charade, do the thing, hopefully do it right, and then go about my normal business and separate my life, my professional life, or my faith journey. You know, like, I have been taught that, like, he's alive, he's with you right now, he has something he's doing in the globe right now in our time. How is he calling you to partner with him? And thank God I've had mentors that have taught me that. And so in the process of doing that, that's where the opioid epidemic, the work that we do around that, that's where that came from. Just lifting up my eyes and seeing there's a story that's happening right here that's affecting my family, affecting my communities, communities that I care about, that I'm from, and what can we do to step in and partner with what God's already doing to bring hope to these people. So India is a special place to me and Jillian. We actually... we dated for a year long distance when I was in India after college. We had met just before I left and went to India with her brother. And when you're the two shortest, guys on a team of missionaries in Asia, you share a bed. So me and her brother, Matt, we had to sleep together for like 9 months of the year that we were there. And so I had to be married to his sister, Jillian, for like 10 months before I'd slept with my wife longer than her brother. Good to get that straight on this podcast. So anyway, love India. That was the first time I ever spent more than a couple months in another country and culture, and fell in love with the people, with the culture, with the food, with India. And I discovered pretty quickly, being in India after college, I was there with a missions organization that was trying to help, start some church planting movements among the high caste Hindus that were very close to the gospel, had never been reached at the time, at least by any of the publications we had seen. And to just be in what is called the graveyard of missions, and to see how fruitless it felt like ministry was there. I mean, years and years people would be there and just barely see any fruit. And you hear stories like that in the Middle East too. And that's just the way it is in certain parts of the world, where there's a strong opposition to the gospel. There's anti-conversion laws. It would have been illegal for us to technically have been missionaries, so we were on student visas. You know what I mean? Like, this is what it's like there, the context of it in the North India. And so when I started hearing about 5 years ago that there was a movement happening in that part of that country that was now considered to be potentially one of the fastest growing disciple-making movements, not church planting, although that's up there on that number too, but disciple-making movements where it was just unstoppable, into the tune of over 20 million within 30 years in that part of the world. I told very kindly my friend who tried to explain this to me that he'd been lied to, and that there's a lot of embellishment that comes out of, and then I started to research a little bit more and hear this from other people. Eventually got to meet the founder, and our mutual friend Justin Masterson and I started looking into this together, because we both felt a passion and a burden to rediscover the parts of our faith that maybe we've lost here in the West. As you look at Christianity, how it's expressed here in the West, it's become a little bit of a show. It's become this enterprise almost. We're building these buildings and we're running it like a business and all this. But in the book of Acts, we see a very simple, organic, life on life, house church, thriving, unstoppable, church planting movement, accompanied by the power of God being demonstrated in places that weren't even Christian at the time. And we're seeing that almost to a T happening right now in this part of the world.
Really?
And at least that's what we had heard. And so we researched it for a couple of years. We got to meet the founder over Zoom. We started saying, what would it look like to bring a small film team and to be as secure as we can for their sake, because we don't want to expose the people who could be persecuted even more for this story coming out if it's not told well. Yeah. And so, but we wanted to see if it was really happening. So literally, Jillian Maitland and I in Masterson, and some of our friends, Eric Hartvig from WFYI downtown, and Nick, who who used to be a Marine Scout sniper, Navy corpsman, who's a sniper and a wounded warrior, and now is making movies in Hollywood as an actor. And he came, and we went over to this small film team, and we just went to document this and see what was really happening. And we conducted interviews, and we heard story after story, and honestly, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to your Western ears, because it's like we're just taught without even knowing it that what you read in the Bible doesn't happen anymore. Unless you're at some super strong, Pentecostal church, it's like, no, we have healings every week. But sometimes it's almost like out of obligation, and this guy, he has to, make sure that he goes forward every week. And, sometimes it's just, we've made it weird. We've made the charismatic, the supernatural parts of our faith here in the West a little weird sometimes. And so I think we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, well, clearly these things aren't happening. These are Hindus getting healed. One after another, we heard story after story of why someone became a Christian. Because to be a Hindu over there, you don't have to stop being a Hindu to pray to Jesus. Like, you can just add him to your shelf of other gods. You can have millions of gods over there. And you don't have to stop being a Hindu and lose your caste standing and lose your relationship with your family and be persecuted by your community and all the things that happen when you give up your faith to become a Christian over there. You don't have to do that to pray to Jesus. And yet they were, to the tune of millions of people. And so we were like, what is happening over here? And I love the story, man, because it's one after another, we kept hearing that it was a healing. It was a physical healing. It was a spiritual deliverance. It was supernatural. It was paranormal practically, you know what I mean? And we finally were interviewing this one guy, and he's like, well, my story's a little different than a lot of the other people who have been impacted by this movement. I didn't come to the faith because of physical healing. I'd heard the scriptures that made sense to me. I'm like, well, that's like all of us, in the West. Incredible, man. And so we went over for almost 3 weeks, just following this movement in different cities, seeing how adaptable it is, and just seeing, man, just the goodness of the body of Christ, living out the mission of Christ, taking care of the least of these, getting super involved in things like sex trafficking and taking care of orphans and widows, and helping kids who are, left abandoned at train stations and the bushes, like taking them and getting them in orphanages and just like helping them get reconciled with their families, even like incredible, just great humanity accompanied by this beautiful love of Christ that was just changing people's hearts and lives. And to that scale and that fast, and we're like, there's no churches growing that fast in the West. So what's happening? Why is it growing so fast? It's not because they got a great show on Sunday. It's because from the start, they only make disciples. Their plan A, plan B, and plan C is to make disciples that make disciples that make disciples who are going to do the works of Christ that we were taught to do, with the selflessness and the selfless love of Christ and the partnership with the Holy Spirit and the Father's heart. And they do that, and they help others do that. And guess what? The communities that would normally persecute them are grateful to them for doing this.
Wow.
And don't want them to get locked up when they get locked up, because that's the guy that helped their kid out, or that's the guy who helped heal my uncle. It's just crazy, bro. And so we are in the process right now of getting this edited down to where this story could be finally released to hopefully the world, and let people see, that maybe God is real. Because at the end of the day, you heard some of these stories firsthand, from our side. This made me wrestle with my faith a lot, because I've been following Jesus for a long time like you have, and I don't have a lot of these experiences happening in my life very often. So, wow, to go back to the scripture that's kind of been steering these episodes about the outward expression of Christ, it starts with being witnesses. And I'll tell you what, dude, I just really felt like the Lord showed me for years in a row. This started 5 years ago. I kept seeing a vision. Like, I thought it was a daydream. I thought I was just daydreaming, because that's one of the ways that sometimes God will speak to me. I'd be doing yard work or jogging, which I don't do that often, or driving, whatever. But I'd just daydream, and I would see me sitting in a chair like this across from someone else. And I couldn't see their face or what they looked like, but I felt like the Holy Spirit kept showing me this over and over, and I never knew what it meant. And I finally asked one day, like, Lord, are you trying to show me something? What is this that I keep seeing? And I felt like Holy Spirit said, you have something to tell the nations, and it isn't going to come from you. I saw that vision and responded to that and started building out a video studio for Two-Eight Ministries similar to this one right after that. And then COVID hit. So it was almost like building an ark and it started raining. But I didn't even need to know why. I just needed to get ready for that. It wasn't music. It wasn't concerts necessarily. It was the stories of God that we needed to hear. And man, we're doing that now. It's kind of creepy. We sat in chairs just like this, across from people speaking in other languages, telling us the demonstrations of the power of God that they firsthand experienced in their bodies, and to the tune of even a little girl coming back from the dead, and 70 people in a village became Christians because of seeing that miracle. What do you do with those stories? And so we're trying to do our best, and we're still fundraising for that too, because it kind of like really put us in the red last year, trying to take on our first documentary. We didn't know how much it would cost exactly. We did our best to estimate the budget, and we're still having to fundraise for that one too. But we cannot wait for these stories to go out, dude. And I cannot wait to learn how to become a better discipler and witness of Jesus by learning from these guys. You know what I mean? To be a student again.
Wow. Eric, I love it because I know for me, there are times that my faith gets challenged because like I don't have those experiences either. Right? And I read the Bible and I'm like, what's the deal with this? You know, and is God really reaching the world? Is he really drawing all people to himself? And instead of going, well, God's probably still the same, right? So yes, I'm going to trust that he's still doing that. That means that I must be getting in the way somehow. I know sometimes for me it's like, oh, well, I don't know if it's actually really real. And then when you hear stories of it actually happening, then you go, really, bro?
Right.
Right. Like, you mean really God's actually doing what he has always done when people just do what he says to do? And it's like, and what I love about it is I love the story. I got a chance to sit in for 2 days of interviews you guys did back here stateside, and I can't wait for the project to be done because it's powerful stuff. And I think what I love, and we'll wrap with this, Eric, is like, what I think God's looking for always is faith and faithfulness. Right? Like when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? Like, do you have faith and are you faithful?
That's good.
Right? Because I have an abundance of resources and I have an abundance of healing and I have an abundance of ideas and I have an abundance of things I'm doing to draw this world to myself. And I want to share that with my children. And like, so will you show yourself faithful for what he wants to invite you into? And man, I just want to commend you because I think what I've seen you do is shown yourself faithful for the past, well, since you started following Jesus.
Thanks, man.
Like, I'll be your disciple. I'll make disciples. Well, what's it look like? Well, it starts right here in Jerusalem, which is your fraternity. That's terrifying, God. We don't do this. Okay, no, just be courageous and do a terrible job at it. Okay, okay. See, now I show up and we're gonna change people's lives. Okay, here's the deal now. I gave you the ability to do music and stuff. So be faithful to the good stuff I gave you. And check it out. We're gonna go to India. What? Right? We're gonna go to China. We're gonna go to Russia. Like, what are you talking about, God? Yeah, just say yes and be faithful. Okay, I will. Like every step of the way, okay, well, now I'm going to come back stateside and I'm going to do a band and we're going to do bar stuff. And then all of a sudden, right? And what I love is if you're watching and listening to the podcast and you're like, maybe you're looking at Eric's life and you're like, I don't have any of those type of stories. But I wanted to ask you, I want to encourage you to just start getting a little compassionately curious of your own life and take a look of, for one, do I know how to hear the Lord's voice? If not, then this past, 7 episodes, we probably need to go back to that relationship up with God and say, I need to find somebody to help disciple me to learn how to hear God's voice. If you do, then the next compassionately curious question is there a point in my life when I know that God asked me to do something? He invited me into a new adventure and I said no. And what I'd encourage you to do is ask for a redo. Go back and say yes to whatever that was.
That's awesome.
Right?
I like that.
And see where he'll pick it up, because what he's going to be faithful to do is lead you out to be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And whether it's your story or you're getting to tell someone else's story, or whether you're telling some of the most heartbreaking stories that are in our own backyard, he'll lead you to bring hope and faith and love to the world. And man, Eric, that's what you've done. I love your story. I love getting to be a part of a little bit of it. I thank you for coming up on the podcast and sharing that with us. And if I can beg you to stay for one more episode, I want us to just unpack a couple more thoughts around it. Eric, people want to get involved. They want to get in touch with you. How can they get in touch with you and Two-Eight and be a part about what you're doing?
Thanks, man. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our work. Two-Eight-Ministries.com is our website. You can pretty much find it all there. Two-Eight Music on Instagram. Two-Eight Ministries on Facebook. We stay as inconsistent, evidently, as possible with those handles. Sorry about that. But yeah, you can go to Two-Eight-Ministries.com and kind of get all the links to everything. And we really want to be faithful witnesses to what God is doing around the world, because it's not about us, man. It doesn't have to be our story. It's always been his story. And so, as people try to be obedient in that call to go out, I just want to remind you that you don't have to tell your story. You're just telling his story. And if you feel like your story's not that great, well, maybe go pay attention to what his story is and keep telling his story. You know what I mean? Because I don't know about you, I feel that pressure sometimes. Am I the person who should be up here telling my story? It's not your story. It's never been our story.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is. So good. Eric's going to be back for one more episode. Until that episode, remember, it is his story. That's the new thing. It's his story. It's not yours. But he's near you. He's for you. And he's created you on purpose and for his purposes. We'll talk to you guys next time right here on the Darren Earlewine podcast.